imagine my life where I am now. See night after the fight, hopeless shame and fear control. Failure rain loud than my destiny. shame and fear.
Shoot.
Oh, there's rain out than my destiny, but you still said qualified with dreams aborted and broken down. You said it's mercy now. Oh, I can dream. He says you can dream again. Oh, yes, you can. You are still here. It's your time. Here he says you can dream again. Oh, yes, you can. You are still. It's your time. This is you're here. It's not too late, no, and it's okay. Oh, God, He opens doors, make some room. If I'm dreaming, let me be. Oh, please don't wake me, 'cause I see victory. It is my reality. But you still set qualified with dreams I've already broken down. You say it's my season now. Oh, I can dream, dream, peace and dream, dream again. Can you still it's your time? No, please say. Don't give up on the dream. Conquer your fears and dream. Press through the tears and dream. He restores the careless dream. You can forgive, you believe all your issues. He's waiting on you for you to dream.
Well, hello, everyone, and you have just been listening to the wonderful sounds of Miss Valerie Webb. I believe that song is from her 2016 album. That particular song is called Dream, and what a befitting song because, of course, as we honor Black History Month, we're kicking it off today. But Martin Luther King Jr., he also had a dream, and this song is a great reminder of how it is never too late to dream. Dream the impossible. Dream whatever it is that you believe God is having you to do. And in due season, it will work out if it is according to His will. So happy February, everyone. Of course, welcome to Birmingham Bible Church's Winning Wednesday, another segment. This is the first day in February. And so, hey guys, give yourself a hand because you made it through the month of January. And so we're here kicking it off again. The beginning of February, we are right here. We love this time. We use this time every Wednesday at 12 noon for various reasons. I've said it before, I say it again. We want to inspire you. We want to encourage you. We want to renew you. But on today, we want to educate you. And so we have some great information on today. This month, of course, in February is a lot of observations. Of course, it is Heart Health Month, and so we're making sure. I think the Heart Association, they have designated this particular month to make sure we're getting our hearts checked out. Of course, it is also the month that Valentine's Day is housed in. So happy Valentine's Day is coming up on the 14th. Make sure you get your gifts together. But it's also Black History Month, and today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, probably a little known Black history fact. And I'm all about learning about our history as African Americans. And so this particular topic for today, I didn't know anything about. I never heard of it. But Dr. Robert Weems is awesome. He is a professor, I believe still at Wichita University. And I've seen he's done a lot of articles, has written a lot of books and pamphlets. And so he's going to talk about Dr. Richard Nixon. And for those of you, you know, he was the president, 37th president of the United States. And I'm sure he was known for doing a lot of things, probably internationally and domestically. Did not know that he opened up the possibilities of African Americans to become entrepreneurs. And so listen, make sure you tag somebody, make sure you text somebody. Make sure you tell somebody about this information that is going down here on today. This is a great history time. So listen, even if you're watching it now, that's great. You can go back and watch it. We're going to show it again later on this afternoon. Make sure your children watch it. Make sure your grandchildren watch it because we need to know about this great information that is going down right now. So of course, I present to you guys Dr. Robert Williams. Hello, Dr. Weems. How are you?
I'm doing great, Lady Pam. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for joining us again. We have you once a year, so you know you're always our person when it comes to Black history. We have some other people, but you give a great presentation, and so we love the information that you bring. We love the style that you present it in, and so we are, of course, ready to hear what you have to say. Just tell us a little bit. I know you've sent me a bio before, but tell us just a little bit about you, just kind of what you do, your history. I don't know why you got into this, and just tell our audience just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I grew up in Chicago, Illinois.
Hmm.
Um, I got my PhD in history from University of Wisconsin at Madison. And it's very interesting in that, when you're working on your PhD, at some point you have to decide what your dissertation research is going to be on. And that's important because what you do your dissertation on, you generally for the rest of your career, you're going to do similar research. And as I mentioned, I grew up in Chicago, and I knew I wanted to do something related to the history of Black Chicago. And I sort of nailed it down to doing something on the political history or the business history. And literally in one of the best decisions in my life, I decided to go and I mentioned to Lady Pam that my camera's acting a little crazy. It won't affect the presentation, but going back to the question that was posed, I knew I would do something either on the political or business history of Black Chicago. I chose the business history, ended up doing a dissertation on the history of a Black insurance company in Chicago. And during the course of my career, I've done a variety of other works related to African American business history. And that's a nice segue into my presentation today that looks at sort of the unprecedented national discussion related to Black economic empowerment during the presidency, during the first term of Richard Nixon's presidency. So I'm going to get ready to share my screen. And I will take this away. Okay, again, the title of my presentation is The National Response to Richard Nixon's Black Capitalism Initiative, an unprecedented public discussion related to African American economic empowerment. Now, on March 5th, 1969, President Richard M. Nixon signed Executive Order 11458, which created the Office of Minority Business Enterprise that was widely known by its acronym OMBE. And by signing Executive Order 11458, that allowed Nixon to, in fact, institutionalize his Black capitalism campaign slogan. Now, in looking at OMBE's subsequent performance on behalf of Black and other non-white entrepreneurs, it generated mixed reviews. But irregardless of that, between the years 1969 and 1972, there was a literal explosion of published works related to Black capitalism, which appeared in books, scholarly journals, business periodicals, and mainstream magazines. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of these earlier publications have pretty much gathered dust in recent years. However, two publications from this era, the Review of Black Political Economy and Black Enterprise Magazine, which both began in 1970, during the heyday of Black capitalism. Both of these remain vital sources of information related to African American entrepreneurship. Now, in fact, this is a photograph of Nixon, in fact, signing the executive order, which created the Office of Minority Business Enterprise on March 5th, 1969. Now, one of the responses to, again, Nixon's promotion of Black capitalism was the National Black Economic Development Conference that convened in Detroit from April 25th to 27th, 1969. And in looking at the promotional material associated with this conference, it reflected the wide range of opinion regarding the question of Black business or Black capitalism. And again, just some excerpts from this promotional material. By Black, not the whole answer. Black capitalism, not the whole answer. Co-ops, not the whole answer. Bringing more money into the Black community, not the whole answer. New economic systems based upon Black needs, a beginning. Now, the keynote speaker at this conference was an individual by the name of Robert S. Brown, who was an economist from Farley-Dixon University. And in his presentation, he realistically articulated Blacks' lack of access to the 6 basic sources of power in the United States. And even though he gave this presentation in 1969, I think a lot of what he had to say is still true in 2023. And he, again, talked about Blacks' lack of access to number 1, huge personal wealth, 2, the top 22 major corporations, 3, the military industrial complex, 4, the federal and state governmental apparatus, 5, the federal legislative apparatus, and 6, the crime syndicate. Now, based upon this reality, Brown concluded that African Americans could only achieve limited economic power. Now, the flip side of this, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee's James Foreman, who gave one of the dinner speeches at this conference, offered a more revolutionary message than Robert Brown did. Now, in a speech entitled Total Control as the Only Solution for the Economic Needs of Black People, Foreman declared, and this is a quote from his speech, "Only an armed, well-disciplined, Black-controlled government can ensure the stamping out of racism in this country. We plead with Black people not to be thinking about a few crumbs. We say think in terms of total control of the US." Now, later in the speech, Foreman issued what came to be known as the Black Manifesto, which demanded $500 million in reparations from America's white churches. And in fact, this is the cover of a 1969 edited book entitled The Black Manifesto, which included a variety of authors, including James Foreman, that talked about issues related to religion, racism, and reparations. Now, one of the books that was published in the period following Nixon's ascendancy to the White House related to Black business development was Whitney M. Young's book, Beyond Racism, Building an Open Society. Now, in this book, Whitney Young, who was the executive secretary of the National Urban League, called for the creation of neighborhood development corporations, which would, and this is a direct quote from the book, provide loans to ghetto entrepreneurs, create cooperatively owned businesses, consumer unions, and housing units, and run management training schools for local business. Now, according to Young, this would be financed by a national economic development bank that would be linked to the Federal Reserve. And Young viewed the NEDB as being analogous to the World Bank through its promotion of self-sufficiency in urban Black America. Now, another book that came out in the aftermath of Nixon's election to the White House and something linked to Black business development was Theodore L. Cross's 1969 book, Black Capitalism, Strategy for Business in the Ghetto. Now, Theodore L. Cross was the editor and publisher of Bankers Magazine. And in his book, Black Capitalism, he proposed a massive cooperative effort between corporate America and the US government to enrich underdeveloped Black urban areas. Now, the major premise of Theodore Cross's book was that urban Black America, and in fact, this is a direct quote from the book, encompasses millions of acres of urban real estate, which simply cannot be abandoned. Now, Cross went on to urge fellow white businessmen to pursue, and again, this is a quote from the book, the forced injection of credit, risk capital, and entrepreneurial skills into the ghetto economy. Now, part of this wide-ranging discussion related to this issue of Black business development or Black capitalism was an edited book that also came out in 1969 entitled Black Economic Development. And this book featured an article by Roy Innis, who is pictured here. Roy Innis was the executive secretary of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, in the late 1960s. And as we'll see in the next slide, he had a sort of alternative proposal to the proposal that Theodore Cross articulated in his book, Black Capitalism. Now, while Theodore Cross promoted a top-down strategy to economically revitalize Black enclaves, others, such as Roy Innis, felt the exact opposite. Now, in the book, Black Economic Development, Roy Innis had a chapter entitled Separatist Economics, a New Social Contract. Now, in this book chapter or essay, Innis argued that Blacks, rather than whites, should lead the economic revitalization of the Black community. And again, in a quote from Innis's essay, Separatist Economics, we are not talking about bringing white businesses in the Black communities, but about building economic instruments that themselves can hire Blacks. Now, hopefully, the audience is seeing that, there was a rather wide range of discussion related to this issue of Black economic empowerment, and we're going to see several other instances of this diversity of thought regarding this topic. Now, another book that came out in the aftermath of Nixon's ascendancy to the presidency was the 1971 book, Black Business Enterprise, Historical and Contemporary Perspectives. And in this book, it featured a chapter by the individual pictured here, Dunbar S. McLaurin, who had his own ideas on how to best promote Black business development in the US. Now, McLaurin's chapter in the book, Black Business Enterprise, Historical and Contemporary Perspectives, was entitled The Getty Plan for Economic Development. Now, McLaurin was a Black economist during this period who owned the consulting firm with a very interesting name, Ghettonomics, Inc. And the Getty Plan was an acronym for the Ghetto Economic Development and Industrialization Plan. And his 1969 proposal urged the US government to view America's Black ghettos as an underdeveloped nation. And McLaurin believed that this would generate strategies that would allow Blacks to develop businesses and industries that could in fact meld with the quote, outside economy. Now, another group that had its own ideas related to Black business development that articulated them during the period following Nixon's ascendancy to the White House was the Nation of Islam. And again, we see an image here of the leader of the Nation of Islam during this period, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And we see an image here of a cover of the publication of the Nation of Islam, Muhammad Speaks. Now, while the Getty Plan sought to have Black America viewed as a separate, underdeveloped nation, the Nation of Islam, which had long viewed itself as a nation within a nation, sought to take advantage of increased US government interests in supporting Black business development. Now, in the April 17, 1970 issue of Muhammad Speaks, an editorial entitled Black Enterprise reiterated the group's beliefs about business development. Quote, people with little or no knowledge of economics have waged at their enterprising brothers and sisters in public and in private. They have labeled them with many terms: Black capitalists, Black bourgeoisie, etc. Black men and women involved in trade and commercial activity have been scorned for that reason, and that reason alone. How ignorant this is. Now, in this editorial, after comparing Black business's peripheral role in the US economy as, quote, like a drop of water in a bucket full, the Muhammad Speaks editorial continued. When you think of this, and then try to figure out how small the Black man's share in this in reference to the US economy is, you see how ridiculous it is for young and old pseudo-revolutionaries to run around crowing about the evils of Black capitalism. Brothers and sisters, Black capitalism hardly exists at all. How many Black manufacturing firms do you know about? Now, Muhammad Speaks staff writer during this period later described how the Nation of Islam sought to attract government support. Quote, during my first months with the paper, we were under a strict gag order not to say anything against the new administration of President Richard M. Nixon, because he had expressed an interest in business development within the Black community. Elijah Muhammad was certain that President Nixon would be calling on the leader of the Nation of Islam for counsel, and maybe with resources and seed money. Now, according to one biographer of Elijah Muhammad, Claude Clegg, when the US government did not respond to the Nation of Islam's subtle overtures made in Muhammad Speaks, and this is a quote from Professor Clegg's book, Muslim emissaries approached federal officials directly in July 1970 to request millions of dollars in aid to train workers in auto mechanics, printing, and other trades. Another biographer of Elijah Muhammad, Carl Evans, has asserted that the Nation of Islam actively sought funds from the Nixon administration because of the group's jealousy of the fundraising prowess of Reverend Jesse L. Jackson. And again, a quote from Carl Evans's book. By the early 1970s, Jackson's organizations had received several large grants from the federal government for poverty programs. Muhammad's people were doing the same thing, converting, quote, unemployable inner city youths into productive members of society. but were doing so with the nickels and dimes collected from members. In the summer of 1970, the messenger decided to follow Jackson's lead. Now, another book that came out in the aftermath of Nixon's ascendancy to the White House was Edward H. Jones's book, Black in Business. And as we'll see, Jones proposed a different type of strategy in terms of promoting Black business development. Now, again, at the other end of the ideological spectrum from the Nation of Islam and the Getty Plan, Edward Jones's 1971 book, Blacks in Business, promoted the notion of something he called integrated ownership, which he defined as, quote, the pooling of resources of Black and white businessmen in partnerships or in joint corporate ownership of corporations as an ideal maneuver for Black businessmen who want to reach both white and Black customers. According to Jones, one of the primary ways this could benefit Black entrepreneurs was that he or she could draw on their white partners' experience and contacts, as well as its greater likelihood, quote, of obtaining financial help from institutions that have historically been extremely reluctant to grant financial assistance to minority firms. Now, yet another interesting proposal that was put forward in the aftermath of Nixon's ascension to the presidency was something by economist Richard F. America, which appeared in the book that we talked about previously, Black Business Enterprise, Historical and Contemporary Perspectives. And as we'll see, Dr. America had a very interesting viewpoint in terms of how to promote Black business development. Now, in this 1971 essay, again, Black economist Richard F. America called for a transfer of 10% of Fortune 500 firms to African American control. Now, the main rationale behind America's proposal was his belief that, and this is a quote from his essay, the establishment and nurturing of African American small businesses, now being undertaken on an increasing scale, does not satisfy the need for African American independence and self-determination. Now, in this essay, America envisioned that, quote, after about 8 corporations have been transferred to Black control each year for 15 years, the procedure would be discontinued, since by then, Blacks will have achieved economic parity, roughly equivalent to their proportion of the population. Now, at this point, I wanted to interject my own sort of what I call retrospective musings. First of all, to be blunt, who could realistically expect that 10% of Fortune 500 companies would be peacefully transferred to African American control? And this might be something we could talk about after my presentation. Similarly, who could realistically expect the American government to peacefully allow Black America to operate as an independent, although underdeveloped nation within the borders of the United States? Now, at this point, I do want to just add my own additional commentary about some of the things we've looked at so far, is that while a lot of these proposals were indeed very interesting, but again, when we talk about business and economics, we do ideally want to have something that is grounded in reality. There's nothing wrong with having a vision, but again, I think we have to have a vision that is grounded in reality, because those sorts of visions indeed have a much greater likelihood of actually coming to fruition. And this is a perfect segue into the next book I want to talk about that came out in the aftermath of Nixon's ascendancy to the presidency, Abraham Venable's book, Building Black Business, an Analysis and a Plan. Now, in looking at Venable's 1972 book, we see something that provides a much more realistic strategy for Black business success. Now, before 1972, Venable worked in a variety of capacities within the Commerce Department, including serving as the Office Minority Business Enterprises First Director, again, the office that Nixon established through his 1969 executive order. And in the book, Building Black Business, Venable offered an early disclaimer about the limits of Black business and what it could do. And just the quote from the book: Black business development will not cure all the ills of the Black community. Black businesses will not by themselves transform bleak ghettos into cheerful suburbs, nor will they necessarily turn racial fear and hatred into trust and brotherhood. Black business will employ some Black people, but not nearly all who are unemployed or underemployed. Black business will help generate economic and political power, but they will not create a self-sufficient community. Now, in his book, Venable offered a concept known as a business association. And this provided a concrete suggestion as to how Black entrepreneurs, despite limitations, could use their existing economic power to achieve greater individual and collective respect in America. And again, just a quote from the book: in Washington, there are approximately 10 Black fuel oil distributors who each buy about 1.5 million or more gallons of oil every year. That volume is not very significant in the marketplace, but a 15 million gallon dealer is significant. If the 10 Black distributors could combine their requirements and negotiate as a wholesaler, they could buy their fuel for approximately 25% less, thus saving about $400,000 a year. And Venable in his book went on to discuss similar opportunities in other industries. Now, Venable also discussed the possibilities associated with a community-wide business association that coordinated Black business associations in individual industries. And then he, in reference to that, he said, and I quote, in 10 years, the Black business community in Washington, and he used Washington, D.C. as a case study, could conceivably increase its profits by $100 million. The total benefit to the community would be tremendous. Now, Venable's vision of these, community business associations also expanded to the regional as well as national level. And again, to quote from his book, if there are 100 Black business communities with the same potential as Washington, then regional and eventually a national business league have the potential of raising up to $1 billion over a decade. That $1 billion reinvested back into the Black community would be an enormous economic boost. Now, one of the things that I personally like about Venable's book and his strategy was that this was literally using resources that African-American business people already had. It was just proposing that a more efficient use of pre-existing business assets. Now, one of the more interesting responses to Nixon's ascendancy to the presidency and the promotion of Black business was associated with the Black Panther Party. And here we see a photograph of the leaders of the Black Panther Party, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. And also we see a cover of the organization's publication, the Black Panther newspaper, which features an image of Huey Newton and Bobby Seale on the cover. Now, during the first administration of Richard Nixon, we saw the Black Panther Party undergo a dramatic transformation as it related to the importance of business enterprise. Now, I want to begin by sharing a quote from the April 25th, 1970 issue of the Black Panther newspaper. The Black Panther Party recognizes, as do all Marxist revolutionaries, that the only response to the violence of the ruling class is a revolutionary violence of the people. Revolutionary strategy for Black people in America begins with the defensive movement of picking up the gun as a condition for ending the pig's reign of terror by the gun. Now, a couple years later, we see the Black Panther Party's opening up a factory in Oakland producing golf bags. Now, looking again at this rather dramatic turn of events, it appears clear that this was based upon the organization's pragmatic response to the growing government repression of the organization. I'm assuming some of you in the audience are familiar with how, the US government came down very hard on the Black Panther Party in the late 60s and early 70s. And this sort of shift into, going into business reflected again a pragmatic response to, some of the many issues that the party was dealing with. Now, interestingly enough, we look at this manufacturing plant that produced golf bags. The profits from golf bag sales, in fact, were used to purchase free clothing that were given away to poor ghetto residents. So again, even though the organization went into business, they were using their profits to literally give free items, in this case, clothing, to the African American community. Now, interestingly enough, Although the Panthers had previously been critical, and this was a term they had coined, blood-sucking Black businessmen, they now openly align themselves with the Black business community, giving free advertising in the Black Panther newspaper to those firms that supported various party initiatives. So again, when we talk about the national response to Richard Nixon's promotion of Black capitalism, we see again a variety of very interesting and in some circles quite surprising occurrences that took place during the first administration of Richard Nixon. And then just a sidebar before I get into the conclusion of the presentation. When we look at the presidency of Richard Nixon, and I explicitly focus here on the first administration, because we know shortly after Nixon was reelected to the presidency in 1972, he had to increasingly deal with the Watergate scandal that ultimately forced him to resign from office in August of 1974. Now, in conclusion, this overview of public discussion generated by President Nixon's Black Capitalism Initiative, I believe has lingering ramifications. Now, 5 years later, as we speak, February 1st, 2023, African-American communities across the country continue to be areas of economic stagnation and underdevelopment. And I would argue that, in fact, there exists a need for another national dialogue related to Black economic empowerment. So I'm going to stop the screen share. Again, kind of crazy moving this cursor.
That's fine. Dr. Weems, this was so in-depth, but as you were talking, and I don't know what years these books were written, but it seems to me like we're still having the same type of discussions, the same debates. We're still talking about reparations. I got somebody I know on Facebook who is repeatedly talking about reparations. Every now and then she'll put something out there about reparations. We're still talking about transfer of wealth. We're still talking about, somebody mentioned programs to train and educate those in African-American community to learn certain trades. Am I wrong in that? Are we still having these discussions however many years later?
Oh, and that's one of the sad realities of all of this, because in my, various presentations and in talking about this, one of the points that I make is that those of us today who are interested in, Black economic empowerment, it's not a question of where we have to, in fact, reinvent the wheel. There were, in fact, a lot of very important ideas and discussions that have taken place historically, because even though I made the point in this presentation that some of the ideas during the period from 1969 to 1972 were a bit fanciful, there were some ideas, and specifically in talking about Abraham Venable's ideas that remain relevant. But yeah, that's the sad idea, that's the sad reality that a lot of things that were discussed 50 years ago are still being discussed today.
Yeah. Yeah. And on your last screen, you said something about there needs to be another roundtable discussion. And I think I've heard this before. I know I believe it. We need to have some other people at the round table. And I don't know who's all at the round table, but the people who have the power in this country, who have the wealth in this country, who have the ability to be able to make things happen, I think they should be at the round table.
And I'm glad you made that point. I just want to kind of elaborate on Richard Nixon's role in all of this, because we know from history Richard Nixon is one of the most I was about to say the most controversial president, but after Donald Trump, Donald Trump is clearly number one
right?
in that regard.
Yeah.
But in terms of Black business, one of the things about presidents, regardless of who that individual is that they have a sort of proverbial bully pulpit. If the president talks about anything, the press tends to pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And because candidate Nixon and President Nixon made these references to Black business and why it was something important, that necessarily helped create this national dialogue. So, going to your point about, who could help stimulate this discussion, the ideal place would be starting with President Biden.
Right.
And then just working on down. Because clearly, and that's one of the sad realities, is that on one level, and I can't speak about Birmingham, but I can speak about, my hometown of Chicago, is that there's some areas of Chicago in the African American community that actually look worse today than it looked 50 years ago in terms of the infrastructure of neighborhoods and stuff. So, yeah, something very tragic has happened over the past 50 years. And again, how can we address this as a community? And also too, just to make a broader point that, building, business in the African American community, while that will necessarily help, Black neighborhood, but it was also help the economies of cities and the broader economy, because when you have more and more African American businesses thriving and paying, taxes and employing people who, pay taxes, that has a positive effect, not just for African Americans, but for the entire local, state, national community. I said, I'm gonna try my camera.
No, you're gonna try it again. Okay, let's try it again. That's fine. Yeah. And also, I don't know, it goes to speak to the heart, because you can't change a person's heart and how they feel. I know a lot of people want to see change, but there are some that don't. There are some that are trying to erase history. And so that I think it's several stumbling blocks that can probably even prevent, because you mentioned how there's a suburb in Chicago that looks worse now. It just kind of.
Well, I'm talking about the areas of the south side of Chicago.
South side, yeah.
Yeah, the main,
Yeah. And then I wonder, has the mentality of some of us have changed? I mean, I don't know, I haven't polled anybody, but you see, I guess back in the day, people more supportive of one another, and so, do we still see that same support? I know some of the books we're talking about, it's not just about Black supporting Blacks, it's about, Blacks actually going out into the other communities and establishing businesses.
Yeah, well, that was, one approach, like Edward Jones' approach. And I believe for Birmingham Bible Church Black History Month, I believe I gave a presentation related to Black insurance companies.
You sure did. I forgot.
Yeah, and that's a classic example of how we as a people have not supported our own, which has led to, pretty much the virtual disappearance of these, very important historic companies. So in the end, when we talk about businesses can't thrive without consumer support.
Right.
And another sad reality that I talk about in my research and is that our collective spending power has grown significantly since the late 1960s, because in 1969 there was a book by this individual, D. Park Gibson, who was a Black marketing specialist, entitled The $30 Billion Negro, which reflected collective Black spending power in 1969. Today, that number is well over $1 trillion. But when we look at how Black people spend that money, most of it is not with other African Americans. So there's a lot of issues, and very complex issues, related to this. But again, a business can't run without consumer support, be they white business, Black business, woman business, Asian business. Yeah.
Right. No, you're right. Yeah, I've heard that the dollar turns, doesn't turn over as much in the African American community, but in other communities it does. So you're right about that. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Weems, for this very insightful presentation. Gave us a lot of things to look at. Hopefully this broadcast will continue to be shared, get into the right hands of other people so that we can all grow, and hopefully our businesses can grow, and just be educated about this so we'll learn how to govern ourselves accordingly. So thank you so much for this. Listen, I'm going to just share with our viewers just a very few announcements that's going to be coming up. One thing I need all of our viewers to make sure they know is that our small groups are going to resume next Thursday. And so we are starting with a new curriculum, 12-week curriculum called Experiencing God. And so you need to order this book. Of course, the book is on the screen. We got ours off of Amazon, so that may be the way to go. But we're going to start that on Thursday, November the 9th. If you are interested, please send me an email at ladypam@tcowi.org, ladypam@tcowi.org, so we can make sure that you get this private Zoom ID information, because it's going to be via Zoom. So we need to get that to you. So again, the curriculum is Experiencing God. We will see you, of course, on Sunday for our temple worship celebrations. Of course, we are in person every Sunday at 10 a.m. there at the C.W. Hayes School, of course, which is located at 505 43rd Street North here in Birmingham. Of course, we also have Kingdom Kids Church. So of course, while they're having adult worship, we will be in the back having fun and actually having a lesson, the same lesson the adults are getting, but just on their level. We are continuing the series, The Family That Wins. And so this is being taken from the 10 Commandments, learning those 10 Commandments, what they mean, and applying those principles to our everyday lives. Also, just a couple of major things that are going on. Don't forget, we have our Black History Tour. We go somewhere the very last Saturday of every month. And so this year we're going to Tuskegee, Alabama. And so we're going to tour Tuskegee University, HBCU, and also going to tour the Tuskegee Airmen Museum. So we're going to have a great time. Listen, just sign up. Those of you who have my number, send me a text, say, hey, I want to go. That's all you got to do is just sign up. We need to get a head count. Also, we'll have a table that's going to be set up for you to sign up. And so we are pleased to have this Black History Tour, in the month of February. It's the end of the month of February. And so this is where we're going on February 25th to Tuskegee, Alabama. Also, our Spiritual Renewal Retreat. Don't forget about that. Spots are filling up fast. This is going to be a great time of renewal, getting away along with God and with others speakers. And so we have a great lineup of speakers. We have Pastor Jennifer Carner. We have Pastor John Cook. We have the Lees, Pastor Lee and his wife, Lady Yolanda Lee out of Atlanta. We have Bishop Kevin Adams and his wife, Lady Cynthia. They're going to be joining us as well. They're going to be our speakers. Listen, it's only $150 per person, which includes your lodging and 5 meals, impactful sections. You can't get that anywhere with that price. And so, of course, you can sign up in person. Those of you who have signed up, don't forget your $50 deposit is due this Sunday. So don't forget that as well. Those are all the announcements that I have for today. Just want to, of course, say thank you again, Dr. Weems, for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to give us some insight into Black history. And so do you have any final words, any final comments, maybe how people can get your books or look at your information that you have out there?
Yeah, well, in fact, it's fairly easy to find my books. You could just go to Amazon and just type my name in, Robert Weems, and my books will come up. And again, for those who are even thinking about purchasing a book, I thank you in advance.
Yes, sir, definitely. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for watching, for listening. Those of you on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Listen, if you're out in the Northeast or out in the northern area, please be safe with these winter storms that are coming, that are probably already at your back door, your front door. So y'all be safe. Everyone be safe. We love y'all, and we will see y'all until next time. Thank you.